Hello.
Hello.
So,
Thanks for memorizing our CVs.
Yeah, Chana. So, Melanie, how did you spend the summer?
We opened a little space in Berlin called a Skinship, a touch-based base for kinship, which was a little problematic in this pandemic times, but we managed to do some experiments and workshops and circles around intimacy. This can be touch or not touch based, for people to gather in a physical space and process whatever is alive for them in this moment. And it's also an art space, so we wanted to have a community-based center where things could continue and where people are able to connect. And it's a queer femme-centering space. It's also a sex-positive space. It's a sex workers positive space. And it's an interspecies space. And it's still very much a baby in the beginning. And our main intention is to centralize somatic awarenesses, so like learning through the body awarenesses, what is going on inside of the body, and how is this like a vehicle of navigation for how we relate to the world and ourselves.
And explain me, this is amazing. How did people react? You also say it's also an art space. It means that it's not primarily for the artist community, but to all those that feel that those issues that you are mentioning right now are fundamental to their lives.
Yeah. And
how do you reach them? I think, do you reach them because you know those communities and people work in them?
Yeah, so we are going through friends networks because we don't do any branding, and in the beginning we also didn't have like a Facebook site or nothing. We just had a name, and then first it was just a core group of people, the nest, that was just like reflecting and feeling what was necessary for the nest space. And then slowly we opened, like one person could invite another person, and then through this now, because the regulations softened and we are also not a commercial space, we're trying to navigate like what we can do and what we can bring to people and how we can bring people together in this time, and also what is needed. And because having a space is so important for like culture making and community forming, especially when it's like an underground community or there's not so much accessibility to certain groups, like because we're focusing on queers and a femme-centralized space. We want to be a safer space. There's a lot of trans people, and it's a sex workers positive space, so for people to gather and have their needs met.
And I have, in the last semester, many questions coming from my students asking me, like, how can we manage what you are just describing? How can we get out of our comfort zone in the artistic community and reach out and really incorporate, embrace, care, be a safe space for others? Like, how do you manage, or how makes it possible, this coexistence? Is it something that you think it comes naturally, or how do you see it?
How we create these spaces is very much guided, so it's a facilitated space usually. If it's a co-creation space, it means that some people have done some kind of basic awareness around how to create safer spaces and how to communicate with each other, like self-responsibility, awareness of the body, asking for consent, honoring each other's boundaries and actually encouraging to get to know your own boundaries, but also expressing need and be able to like ask for help when something comes up for you. So, and these are also things that we teach in the workshops, and we start very slow usually, like really, really like very safe, like how close can you go without that your nervous system gets accelerated or you get overstimulated, but where is your, like, you know, from a scale to 0 to 10, where is your 0, you know? Like, for example, me now in this space, I'm not at 0 because there are people looking at me and there are people looking at me through that camera. So I'm a little bit like, you know, activated. So I have like cortisol running through my system. There's a little bit of adrenaline. I'm still kind of chill. It's not too bad because everybody's really nice. But you know, it's not that I'm on the couch at home with my cat.
No, I know that, but what I mean is also the questions that they are posing is what's the role that artists can play to contribute to that, you know, social transformation that you are so much invested in and that we are all really want to happen. And I'm asking myself because I really want an art school as you are describing that, and it's difficult sometimes to bring ourselves out, to ask ourselves how much can I give up so that others are better. And I just wonder if you see a change, if you see us or artists contributing positively, or it's just an initiation from an artist group, but actually at the end it could run completely without art and artists.
Well, for me personally, it couldn't, but maybe for others it could, you know, because for me, art is a way to like challenge culture, to bring in different thought forms, different feelings, to reflect on maybe which thought forms and feelings are going extinct, to transform through representation, to transform through experimentation, and this can also be social experimentation, but it can also be sound experimentation or touch. And so for me, this is a very, very important space for that is needed in culture to give a counterweight on that what is kind of suppressing us and others.
No, I cannot agree more. I'm just like in the process of really wanting to really embrace those processes in an accelerated way. It's my anxiety and the anxiety of many artists that they are feeling that exactly this is the way to go. And yet, as you know, in the art world and the art system is so incredibly reluctant to many of the things that you are mentioning, and sometimes one feels so lost, not knowing exactly where to start, where to introduce those moments of care, and exactly what you said, acknowledging each other's boundaries and how to go from there. So, and you must experience it also many times, because this is a space where you can be at ease and perhaps you are with a community that you fully know and you care for, but when you are exhibiting, for example, in 2 years in the Venice Biennial, it's going to be a completely different setting. So I wonder how you deal with that, and also how can we learn from people like you that know so much, because you have experience dealing with so many different communities, to make changes in structures that they are not originally born for that. And that's something that I'm asking myself that, because the other day I read an interview with Angela Davis, and she said diversity, I think, was a scandal notion. Like, you know, how can you just try to include without doing structural transformations? How can you actually dare to invite those that they have been historically excluded and you know, without changing anything, just adding them like this? And I thought it's so incredibly, but this kind of, many of us like working at the art schools have not been designed for those type of interaction, and yet, yeah, what can we do in our everyday practice, even institutionally, to make that happening more and more?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's like the problem is in how our institutions are fabricated. So if we want to include people who are now excluded, we have to reform the institution itself. And second of all, I think, in my personal practice, it's not that I've been just starting to do this. I mean, this has been like a journey of like 20 years, and it's been not easy to like find an access into this institutional world. And somehow at a certain point there was a twist in the zeitgeist, and suddenly all the things that I was talking about were accessible and welcome, and time is changing, and there's more need for addressing certain subjects that are all alive in us, like, for example, going away from objectivity towards subjectivity and the feeling world, and connection and care, and something that goes beyond the individual needs and glorification of the genius or whatever. And I think the way to start is just don't give a fuck, just do whatever you think is important and just start. And specifically talking about the art world, and the way that I personally feel that works for me is by doing personal sessions, bodywork sessions, like sexuological bodywork sessions that are one-to-one, but also facilitating workshops in these types of spaces, or creating a space, or have some kind of balance that is not just like a mind thing, but it's also like hands-on and on the street, that the values that I believe in are actually actualized.
And how do you see it, for example, when you exhibit your work, like now, like in an installation setting, and you cannot control, or the parameters that are at place are not exactly what you are describing? Or how can we produce more hybrids of this type of dynamics in between different systems of knowledge, but also, more post-human even, like interacting with everything that is sensorial, and that white cube situation that is actually trying to neutralize it to a moment that is actually the negation of the sensorial. I think it's only directing it towards very precise points that are not what you are describing. So how do you negotiate that in your own work?
I think, like the way I said, by having work that fits into spaces like this and communicates on that level, and also do the work hands-on by actually creating spaces for these things to be practiced. So it's not just the idea and the information that is secondary received, but it can actually be experienced directly by whoever feels called or is called in to work with these subjects.
So you kind of imply that in the future we could see that an exhibition space is actually an exercise space,
I
where
think
the work activates certain types of exercises that enhance all these interactive sensorial relationships that made us aware of a different type of coexistence, no?
I think this is already happening, and I think this is totally possible, but it's does give away it does have a certain temporarily if it's in an institution space, which is different than if it's in a co-created community space,
No,
where,
of course.
where everybody contributes to the life of the space, and where everybody
brings. What is really fascinating is the fact that if the exhibition spaces, like in plural, of many different levels, because the levels of institutions and its form are also very plural, they could contribute to this idea of the exercise, then if more spaces like the communities that you are describing would exist, then the feedback in between those institutional or differently activated by social dynamic spaces would just profit from a new linking to those other communities, which is now not happening. I think you go to an exhibition space, but actually that space is not connected directly with any idea of an active community. Normally, historically speaking, they have been connected with an idea of a social class, because they are kind of embedded into the logic of capitalism, even early capitalism, not even post-capitalism, but the idea that there is a class which is educated bourgeois that knows them, sees it go away, and what you are kind of implying is, what we could imagine is an incredible feedback in between that, let's say, less dynamic but still connected with a community that is way ahead. That, and then these two systems of economic organization, class organization would mingle in ways that now are not. And I think that this is exactly where I see the incredible visionary potential of it. But on that sense, we will need more communities like the ones that you are describing being connected. Because what you are saying about the space in Berlin is not only that those communities exist, but certain spaces will shelter them in a way that they get activated among themselves, so that you get, a dynamic inside, which is a very fertile thing.
Yeah, and also if you run your own space as a group that has aligned values and maybe aligned struggle, creating under a structure of hierarchy or power that comes from the institution, it's on the floor. And what we think is also, that's why space is so important, that there's cheap space, affordable space where culture can come to life. And for me, it's also important that the things that are being injected into culture are sustainable. They're not just I'm going to go here for my hit, and then you burn it off again and you're back in the machine. But it's tools that you can learn, and that where you and others will benefit from for the rest of your life. That's the goal. So it's also starting from a base, but before you start, you need to sort of want to learn these things, and it's not like you go to a show and you're kind of surprised and you take whatever you want from it, and maybe you apply it even in your life, maybe not, but it's different than when you commit that you want to change something in yourself, through which you can show up to your community or culture in a different way. That's a whole different intention with a different impact.
No, I couldn't agree more, but I suppose that the future of what you are describing is in a future, certain historically inherited structures of power called institutions of art may dissolve into something else, and we shouldn't be afraid of them getting dissolved. I think I'm trying to imagine sometimes with students, exhibitions happening in forests, or the ocean being an art space, or it's not about depriving ourselves from spaces, or even the different ways and others, even to a really radical transformation that would erase some of the traits of hierarchy, as you are describing, but also of seeing and feeling and feedback, a certain idea of class that is embodied into that perception. So it's not only perception for its sake, but it's a perception in order to reinforce certain traits of your social class, and this is absolutely imaginable that it disappears. And I think, what I really like in your work is human coming out of being exposed to such work, no?
Mm-hmm. What is the question?
The question is no question. I'm just engaging into my own thoughts.
Yeah.
But the question is also how do you see this work has been produced in 2016 or around it?
Yeah, 2014, 15, and 16.
Yeah. And then if you see it now, and what is it for you to see the work now? Are things changed, or would you do it differently?
Well, I just had to think about what you said before, that now, yesterday or so, Elon Musk released a new video of the Neuralink development that he's making, where they implant a chip in the brain of a pig, and it seems like we're going into this separation where some people become maybe more like cyborgs or post-human, and the others are turning more to the body and back to the body, back to the body. And I wonder, yeah, I'm very curious how that is going to develop, and also if there's a possibility to link those two. You know, how can we can we become like highly physical aware techno beings, or will there be some split of people rejecting technology or like uploading themselves online? This is more something that I'm really confused about also, because of course I'm really now from the somatic group, so it's like return to the body, you know, this is where all the medicine is, this is where all the wisdom is.
What do you think yourself? It's going to be a split or it's going to be a synthesis?
Yeah, I think there's, how I experience it in myself is that there is a split, you know, that it's not really possible to unite the two, because as soon as I'm on my devices, I'm in my head. And when I'm off my devices, I'm in a whole different texture of relating to the environment around me. And this is something that I'm just really observing, you know, like when the whole Corona thing started, what I did is just like turn down all the devices, you know, and just went back to the body, like completely went off social media distancing, turned off the Instagram, turned off all the information, and just made sure I had some people that I trust in terms of how they process and choose the information to be informed about what's going on in the world, but otherwise just go back to the body and have some Corona buddies that I could practice, you know, being in spaces together and touch exercises and intimacy-related experiments, and just dive deeper into what can we actually feel and what can we actually sense in what we are now as humans. And I noticed that my life quality went up, you know, meaning that my thoughts environment was better, my feelings were calmer and happier and slowed down, and as soon as the devices went on again, it was like more stress. And
it's interesting, I think on the one hand I agree completely, and on the other I really cannot accept it. You know what I mean? One part of me is the one that does not want to split.
yeah, I understand.
I want people like you kidnapping technology for making technology do what you are describing with all this sex positive. I want sex positive technology. I want every of the elements that create these communities, which are complex and they are really, really based on the values that we name today also compatible with technology. And I think that is that those guys are the major enemy, because they are just using them as tools, and I see them as organs, and the fact that they are not activated as organs make them impossible to act as such. And then I thought about, I really couldn't because of work going out of technology, but then I thought it's super kind of easy to really go to my Spanish village, forget the world, and just compromise deeply with the only people that is around me. That's the ones that I really can control and care, the others. And on the other hand, I still think that I cannot let it go, that there is something retro about it, that is something pushing me as a woman to hate it, because this realm of masculinity and hyper controlling capitalism wants to exclude me, so I cannot give up. So it's completely conflicted. And I think that that we need a completely different programming of what I think that technology is nothing or nothing different than a lung or the heart or an eye or an ear, but I also want it to be mine. So in that sense, I really want my ears, my eyes, and so it's like I'm not very articulated on that, but I definitely cannot see technology. I don't want to see technology as an enemy, even if I know it is right now as it's designed.
Yeah, I also don't have the final conclusion on that. It's just something that I'm try to navigate and just try to make the best out of the mess that is going on at this moment. And one way for me to deal with that is this way, by doing connection workshops and intimacy and consent trainings
And you don't see any hope for, including technology into intimacy?
I think it is a great tool for intimacy, but it's a specific intimacy, and there's a whole range of intimacy that we are maybe not exploring in mainstream culture, or also that we are neglecting if we focus too much on this specific type of intimacy.
But don't you think, and I perhaps misread it, but I see your works as high technological. So I am maybe projecting, but sometimes I've been in front of your work thinking that this is my absolute technological dream. So that there is some sort of computer in ayahuasca, the camera is from ayahuasca, the camera is falling in love with the human is, everything revolving, the system just getting an indigestion, and I thought, and also the editing, the sound, the incredible sound experience that some of your work produce to me is technological. Not that music is, not necessarily, but I think that since you made it an organ, so it makes it kind of middle-aged at a certain point. It has something totally retro, but also totally in love with the media that allows you to create it. Mm-hmm. So with the cameras, with the stage, and then there's a plant, but there's also a software that allows the cuts to happen and the video to come together. So all of a sudden, in my mind, all these elements become one, and then I become hopeful. This is the technology I want, and that technology can love me, and I love it. So you kind of, so that's what I'm always seeing you as an artist that is seen that way as possible. Mm-hmm. So perhaps it's different for you, but for the viewers, it produces an enormous joy. So there is something super stupid in the most impressive, relevant way, that you kind of don't act like Elon Musk, giving so much importance to the fork, not just the fork. So if you want to eat with that, it's a choice you have, you can do it.
I think it's nice maybe if we show a clip, because it really fits to what you just said. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Let's see if I can do this.
Yeah, should we share the screen, Melanie?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
Can you see the screen, Chus?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, now we go.
Okay. Where is it? 99. Okay.
Really awkward. I had a show. See you later. Bye. Your life is totally full of problems. Really good. Is something just helping me? Hi. Please. I can't composition. You're really good at composition. I feel like all of my photos, look so balanced. And I feel like all my followers, they really appreciate it. You should submit it to me. Yeah, I got a follow list. Are they Swedish? Oh my god, there's so many. Hey. It's hard to be because you are a god stuck in a perfect vessel. With the dirty dolphins,
feel like plants are our black relatives.
We cannot comprehend the magic of nature. Actually, it really came down to being very simple. She showed me a tree, and it was a beautiful tree full of all these green leaves. And she picked one leaf off the tree, and she said, all you have to do is be this one leaf. That one leaf is very complex, but it's a part of a whole being of the tree. So if you are bringing love into your life, that love spreads.
Oh, hello. I am a potted plant.
30 seconds it says on the paper.
Hero. I'm born in Germany, and I'm single. My former owner dumped me on the street. That's how I met one of your lovely kinds. I think she's in the room too. She realized you and me are just different aspects of a single condition. That, according to your point of view, makes me a person and you a plant.
Okay, we're back. Are we? Yeah.
Would you like to comment on the clip we just saw?
Yeah, I think what I see is the confused state of the human that we are today, and how this mixture of how we are all these different things, you know, at the same time. I think this is very important for me to bring forward, that sometimes we are like the broken, traumatized, confused person, and sometimes we're on top of the world, and sometimes we're really caring in and one with the plants that surround us and what we want to care about, and sometimes we're like, you know, the ego, selfie person online, or a lot worse. And I think this is one of the layers that is always brought forward in the videos, like the complexity of these things that we all are, and through which we try to be us, whatever that is. And another thing is also the kind of taboo on talking about love or care, or how we all are raised by love, not just us as humans, but we're all nurtured by love, also other species than just us, and that this is somehow like not cool, or not centralized in the way how we perceive our culture, or how we perceive science. You know, science is always centralizing the differences instead of like what we actually share with each other, and how would our world look like if our whole scientific system is based on similarities, and like how we actually care for each other as a system, and how we are part of that system of care. So if we don't care in our system, then it will eventually like mean self-destruction.
But it's, one question, what do you think that love is a taboo still? You think so?
I think so, yeah.
In what sense?
I think it refers to the world of emotions, and of course, since the Enlightenment, we are glorifying the intellect or the mind, contrary the body, you know,
But this dualism, it's also on the one hand you're right, but on the other it's also culturally produced, that there is this dichotomy, that there is that dialectic, that it's unsustainable. Who would believe that your hand is not thinking when it's touching an apple, when it's not loving it at the same time, it's silent at the same time. So, I think that it's a lack of a language, and not every culture lacks this language. And actually, I've been very surprised because I've been working with scientists, and then when they think that you are not going to understand anything, they just switch and talk about love non-stop. So they
really?
are thinking that is the only language that, and then they talk about the love of the cells, and then if you ask certain processes, what is the motivation, why do they happen, the answer is love, because organism and nature has a love for itself, and then just produce certain processes, and the energy that's there cannot be only called energy, it needs to be called love, because otherwise it's for self-preservation, and that's much more clear for them than for us. So at the end, self-preservation and love becomes one word, which is also very complex and not uncontroversial, but I think that is really so different from culture to culture still, that is difficult to generalize. I think, of course, I live in the middle of Europe, so I know what you mean, but it's not in every part of the planet the same, no?
No, of course, I'm also speaking to the West, and I am a person from a European city, so my work centralizes around that, because that's what I am and that's who I speak to. And I feel, so I'm not speaking about a culture who's has a total different viewpoint on reality than mine.
Yeah. But what I meant also by culture is actually capitalism. I think it's not culture per se, but is shaping our idea of love, but love has been neoliberalized. So in the last 300 years, that it has been under a really strong neoliberal process where certain even cultures are much more givers of love and passionate because of the south, and you may be cold if you are from the north, and there is a taboo perhaps, but this is all how capitalism produces ideas of efficiency and the efficiency of emotions working in certain pieces of the system. But I don't know, I just don't have that view of being a problem, but I understand what you mean. But it's interesting that, for example, many historical moments of the 80s, and then again at the moment of the 2000s, in Spain, love was such a big thing and so present in many realms that it was much more an agent of destruction of institutional practices in a good way. It was kind of very, very disruptive, and then it disappeared again. And it's interesting to remember that, because it's not only something that's about to happen and now it's probably more in demand, but it's something that already happened. Like even these underground cultures where the queer communities were really in charge of activating the whole self-perception of a whole city like Madrid in the 80s, that was absolutely disruptive in the most amazing productive way that we ever experienced in Spanish culture in the last century. So, that lasts for a decade. It has only and that's the thing, that it did not last longer. Also because other processes encountered that one and destroyed, drugs, and the fact that it was very difficult for those communities to survive and adapt under the conditions that they were imposed by the European Union when it came. So the superimposition of a different institutional structure in the national state structure of Spain destroyed that environment totally. So, I also think that the European Union is really against love.
Yeah, let's do something about that.
Yeah, what could we do with everything that is absolutely antagonistic to love? But where do you see the problems with love, mostly? You mean about the social, cultural understanding of it, or doing something?
Yeah, well, one thing, like you said, is like we need more language and refinement around how do we perceive reality. And one of the things we can imagine is like, why do we only have one word for love, for example, and then especially in the West, meaning love, romantic love. But what about the love for, you know, your house or your cat or your iPhone or your brother? The love for your brother is different than the love for your mother, or the love for your mother is different than the love for your school teacher or for the baker, or, you know, maybe that person that you just saw for one night. And why do we not have more language around what love can be, or why are we so limited in defining our relationships? You know, there are so many nuances that we can bring into how we relate to each other, and what kind of alternatives we have to conventional relating, and that also meaning there needs to be more definitions around what actually love can be, and then that can also give more clarity around what that structurally would need, or how that can be preserved or carried, or can really root itself into culture in a different way.
And I think this is really fundamental. I spent the summer reading the PhD of Hannah Arendt, is called Amor Mundi. So she wanted to introduce the question of love into political science, and she was literally sent to hell with it. So it was the book that everyone wanted to avoid, and she would only insist on it at the end of her life. But she wanted to go back to San Agustin, and then because of that, she was kind of reduced to some sort of a neo-religious, not philosophical enough type of argument. And then she was absolutely against romantic love, but also making love the only possible ground for democratic relations, which love is not necessarily consensual. It's a much more complex than that. And it's so, I was so taken aback. I was thinking that I was reading like that it was sent from the future. But you know, it is so radical because there's so many moments of agreement right now between practices in contemporary art like yours and practices in philosophy, and moments that have been totally forgotten on purpose, that they really nobody had any interest in defining new political science and possibilities of different contracts among groups and communities based on something that is called love, because love was, as you said, a complete reduction of a literary passion of the 19th century Germany, or some sort of, you know, like the paintings and the poetry of just the Sturm und Drang type of, you know. But this is just one section of the whole thing. Love was not meant to say only that.
Yeah, and also maybe taking a different perspective on how what serves the other is also serving you. And I think now we have this idea that somehow things should be like useful or meaning something for us. But I think the only way to see it is if we do something for ourselves, it's also serving others. And that's just something that I feel also needs more weight and has going a bit to the background because of all these other things that are perceived to be more important. But it's also things that I don't know how to do all that myself, you know. I'm also just like struggling to make sense of it all.
Yeah, but you have been dealing with it a lot, I think, not only love, but also the question of sexuality and intimacy and the interaction between these three realms. I think is fundamental we have to bring them to a new level or to a different. One can think that those notions are vessels that potentially may serve many more functions than the functions that they are performing now. So that sexuality is not only to express passion but also expresses the possibility of others to release certain feelings that are fundamental for life to continue for them and things like that. So I think that's a very important. But as you said, it's even difficult to talk about it. I think when you see it in the videos, it's actually easier.
Yeah, because what just comes to mind now is that I made this film about children reflecting on like nature and animals and the environmental issues, and that one and what they think should be the solution, being like 9, 10 or 11 years old. And one of them said like, I would totally give all my belongings away and live a very simple life that will be more sustainable for everybody if you would also do it. You know? I think this is a very smart point. Yeah, how much are we willing to really sacrifice? Yeah. So maybe we should open it up for the audience.
We can open it to the audience, perhaps.
Yeah.
We should give up our voice and give it to others.
Is there someone who wants to say something or ask a question?
Is it your first day in the art context presential? They should use it.
Yeah, it's my comeback. Corona comeback. Okay, we have a person.
Wow.
You sure? Don't want to ask questions, or maybe I start? Because
I just want to have some water. I think this is mine.
Chus, you asked before if Melanie would do her works differently than in 2014, 15, 16. And I think that's a quite interesting question, because with Corona I was often asked like, in the Kunsthaus, now with Corona, did you change your program, addressing new issues and stuff like that? Is it easier if I can hear it better?
Yes,
yeah, okay.
Much better.
Okay.
And we have you on the screen, which is much friendlier.
Yeah, I guess so. So everybody who wants to have a question needs to come here. And then I said, actually, we didn't change the program, and I'm quite happy we were able to continue what we planned, because there's so many issues that are so present now, or more pressing through the Corona situation. And it was the same with your work, Melanie, when these meat factory issues came up here in Germany with Tönnies and all these horrible meat production. And every day I was coming here to work in the Kunsthaus, and I saw this video with this woman cuddling with this huge pig and being really in love with this pig. I thought, yeah, it's all there, and the video is not like a response to Corona, it's a response to many issues that were there long before Corona made us look at them. And also in the other video, it's all about medicine, and not all about, but it's about medicine and healing. And so, and what we are right now is struggling for the right medicine, and since we don't have a medicine, we need to distance from each other, and so we are going for the homeopathic way of dealing with it. So I think there are so many issues in it, so I thought it's interesting to think about if you would do it differently today.
You mean like now in the pandemic, or because I anyway see all the works already outdated, you know, it's just like it's made for the moment, and I already see them, you know, like in 10 years from now, like, oh, look at that funny old phone, and
That's only you.
maybe, but yeah.
Because you are the mother.
Okay, back to the question. I don't know if I would make those different, but I'm always thinking around themes that represent these things that I think are really in actuality now, and that are just kind of missing from the big lines. You know, things that need to be more brought to light and need to be more supported. And I think the whole Corona thing won't really change my discourse. This is just my subjects. So whatever happens, that will be my focus. And it's just now that maybe more people are thinking about it. That's great. So yeah.
And are you working on something right now?
It's a secret.
No.
Yes.
Un poquito.
No. Well, I've mainly been focusing on the space, and I feel I cannot really speak about it because today is like my first day back into this world, and I feel still a bit shy. So you have to ask me in the next talk.
Don't tell anybody.
No, right.
Nobody's watching anyways.
Yeah, no. This is my boundary. Yeah. But I'll tell you later on the phone. No, it's a bit too much going on in my head now for that. Yeah. I feel also I'm a little bit reaching the end of the talk.
That's fair.
Unless there are burning questions.
Come on.
No. You
But
have
I think
another?
that for a first day, it has been great.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna come to Berlin to see you to know more about what you're working on.